And here, it really needed to take a step back and say, I needed to listen. And that's not always the best thing for me, right? But it's something I need to practice.
Yeah.
And it's listening to people and understanding them so that they can come back to me later on and say, hey, look, we trust it, what you're asking for us to do, Aaron. We trust we can get behind you and kind of, you can be a leader with us.
Things are just faster and faster. So being able to slow down, right? Listen, and then speed up.
It's not numbers. It's not a number on a spreadsheet. It's not, solving this problem X, Y, Z. It's listening to somebody and telling them this is still your job and you are valuable. And that's the hard part. Yeah, that was the hardest lesson for me, for sure, on that. There's those types of human challenges again. Yeah,
it's part of being a leader, right? And
that's right.
Right. It's not every day is easy.
That's right. Exactly right. Hey, look, people are still going to look for you to be a leader and to provide that steadiness, and not add to the chaos, right?
Yeah. No. And it's so important, right? And I think you said with the word pivot as well, right? The world looks different every month. So you have to be able to be adaptable or be able to pivot. And that also takes planning, right? To be able to do that. Right. So you don't lock everything in and then you're like, oh, we can't do anything, right? I still burn my hand a few times, right, on that stove. So
of course.
Not as much anymore, but...
Well, good for you. Sometimes I got scars on both hands, but that's okay.
So you stopped cooking. No, I'm just kidding.
I thought the right hand was smart, but then left, no, not so much,
This episode is sponsored by Sega Electronics, a North American distributor of interconnect, power, and electromechanical products, and a provider of custom solutions. With more than 135 years of innovation and service, Sega delivers quality components and trusted expertise through its distribution confidence business model. Headquartered in Middleborough, Massachusetts, Sega supports customers across North America with a network of sales representatives, power system engineers, and strategically located service centers. Their 2 distribution centers total over 268,000 square feet, along with a 47,000 square foot custom solution center in Texas, all designed to keep technology moving forward. Learn more at Sega.com. The industry default in operation right now is more automation, more speed, more output. And yet the senior leader running one of Sega Electronics' most significant distribution moves made a different call. Flexibility over automation. Manual systems his team could grow into. And this was a choice to build for the next decade, not the next quarter. Welcome to Leadership Manufacturing Podcast. I'm your host, Sannah Vinding. I'm an engineer, go-to-market leader focusing on how leaders operate when complexity is high and the answers are not always obvious. This show is for leaders across electronics, manufacturing, distribution, and the supply chain. And it's all about practical leadership for technical teams. No hype, no theory, just what actually works. A senior operation leader's job is not to chase the newest tool. It is to know exactly which decisions belong to the system and which decisions belong to the people running it. My guest today is Aaron Hein, and he is the Senior Director of Distribution Operation at Sega Electronics, one of North America's long-standing electronics distributors. He joined Sega through a promotion within the TTI family of specialists, where he previously served as Director of Operation at TTI. He led a team of more than 300 people across outbound processing, warehouse management systems, and strategic operational initiatives. In today's show, we talk about why he chose flexibility over automation in the new build, how he leads a team that is brand new to the work, and how he communicates with intention across distance, and where AI fits in operation today, and the leadership skills that he believes will define the next decade in this industry. Let's get into it. Enjoy the episode. I'm excited to be here today because today I'm joined by Aaron Hein. He's the Senior Director of Distribution Operation at Sega Electronics. So welcome, Aaron.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and enjoy this conversation that's about to happen. Thank you. Yeah.
So I always have this when I have somebody new to interview, right? Opening on the show is to say, okay, what's your passion or what excites you about the electronics industry? And I want to hear your story. behind it?
Sure. I think what's great about it, honestly, is that you see a lot of different things. So, sometimes you talk to somebody about distribution, and they're like, oh, well, you just take a box and you put the box on a conveyor or whatever it is, and then you ship it to a customer. And
Yeah.
yes, there's some truth to that, but each one of those boxes are something unique, right? The parts are unique. What they're going into is unique. And so I think what's a good story always for us is to tell people, and even I would use this same message for my team members on the floor, is that you're touching a lot of different industries, a lot of different components that are going in to a lot of different environments. I think that's a really neat thing to sell to people. And then ultimately, we show them a picture of an aircraft or a drone or something like that, and they're like, wow, this little part out here in the warehouse goes into that. And that's a really neat thing to sell to people. Yeah.
Yeah. It brings the bigger picture together, right? And also being proud. I think I'm proud of everything I've touched on and been part of in my career. And it's just it's like this concept, right, went into this real project, but what happens in between is, some people think it's like I don't know, it's not a magic box, right? But it's like, what's going on? And being part of that, it's just, it excites me. So
yeah, I absolutely agree. I think sometimes we look at the finished product and we're like, oh, that's great, there's a finished product. But you don't realize all the steps that had to get to that finished product, right? And to be a piece of that, I think is the exciting part of it, right? So I agree. I think that's a neat thing to get into. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we love the industry. No.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
Getting more in. No, that's awesome. Okay, I want to touch on, because you came from TTI and then you moved into this role at Sega Electronics. So when you first stepped into it, what's actually, what realized you, when you saw this job, what was actually required from you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes we lean really heavy on what made us successful, right?
Yeah.
Why I ended up getting this job. And you go back and you look at your resume or you look at what you've written down on a sheet of paper and you're like, oh, I need to do those things in the next job. Yeah. And sometimes you forget, in order to do those things that are kind of your high level milestones, it took a lot of things to get there, right? It took a lot of trust. Yeah. It took a lot of building a relationship and getting people on board with your concepts and your strategies and all that. And that doesn't across on a sheet of paper, right? That's your interactions, much like we're doing here.
Yeah.
Talking to each
other.
How you
show up, right?
That's right.
And how you communicate. Yeah.
Absolutely. Being present, talking to somebody on the floor, understanding, I know you're asking my story, but it's like, for me, managing people is exactly the same. What's their background? What's their story? How do I connect to them? How do I then come back to the floor or come back to the environment, the warehouse floor, 3 to 6 months from now and say, hey, remember that one time we talked about this? Oh, okay, now let's expand on that. And now it's a work-related conversation with a personal connection, right? So I think when I came here to Sager specifically, the challenge for me was I was successful in the execution of things, right? A project, cost savings, productivity, quality improvements. Yeah. And here it really needed to take a step back and say, I needed to listen. And that's not always the best thing for me, right? But it's something I need to practice. Yeah. And it's listening to people and understanding understanding them so that they can come back to me later on and say, hey, look, we trust it. What you're asking for us to do, Aaron. We trust we can get behind you and kind of, you can be a leader with us, as opposed to telling you, hey, this is what we're doing wrong. We need to do this, or this needs to improve, and here's how, right? Yeah. So maybe not so much execution, but more listening. Yeah.
No, yeah. And again, right, everything goes faster and faster and faster, right? If you look at how the attention span we have, right, or what's going on in the world with disruptions, right? And now AI is going in as well. So things are just faster and faster. So being able to slow down, right, listen, and then speed up, right? Because you can't just sit and slow down totally. You need to, it has to be, you have to follow. But I think the listening part is such an important skill to have. And you can listen in different ways, right? Because you can listen and understand, and you can listen and just like, and then you go another way, right?
That's right.
Understand.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that's maybe the summary of it all is, right, there's a huge human element to all of this. Yeah. And sometimes people get caught up into the data, the numbers, and the things that are happening around us. And the human piece of it is so important, especially for what I do and connecting and building these teams. That it requires that active listening, right? And for me to say, I can listen to you, I can, even if it means take a note or make a reminder or something to kind of connect with you later on with.
Yeah, and use that as well, right? When you're explaining if something is shifting or you have to pivot, right? That you understand what it is from that situation and from that role. I think that's just a bigger picture of the whole communication and understanding.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Especially when you then get to a point where you try to implement something that impacts their day to day,
Yeah.
right? If I have no personal connection with you now, it seems very standoffish and
Yeah.
it doesn't come across exactly the same way, right?
Yeah. No. So you actually led it like a major shift, right? Because you closed one facility and then you build up another one. I want to ask you about what was the hardest leadership moment during that transition?
Yeah, in particular, we had a site that was in the Massachusetts area, and Sager's got a long history in that area. So I think that the biggest challenge really for us was it made it feel it looks like the right business decision, obviously, right? That's why we're doing it. But the empathy of the employees and understanding, look, this is impacting their lives, right? It's impacting their daily lives, and so I think to be able to talk to them about why we made this business decision, be upfront about that, but then also have the empathy with the team to say, hey, but I understand, right? I understand this is a huge impact for you, and we're here for you, right? You are part of the team, even though that in the long run, this may not be where we're physically at, but you are part of the team today and making this a successful project. So I think that the hardest part for me was that, right? It's not numbers. It's not a number on a spreadsheet. It's not, solving this problem XYZ. It's listening to somebody and telling them, this is still your job and you are valuable. And that's the hard part. Yeah. That was the hardest lesson for me, for sure, on that.
Yeah. So have you changed the way now, just, thinking and looking over the last couple of years, have you changed the way you communicate?
Yeah, I have to be more intentional. I would say, especially with this project, I'm down in Texas and they're, halfway across the country and another's, and so I'm used to being able to walk out on the floor and talk to people, right. And get out and engage with them. And so I have to be more intentional with my time when I'm doing these virtual communications, right. So I'm not the best at that. That's a bit of practice for me. Quite honestly, right. I mean, I think I'm more spontaneous by nature, right. So to now have a more planned, structured, rigid timeline, that holds me a little bit more accountable, right? To say I need to communicate in these intervals, even if I don't have good information or complete information, I need to do it because they need to hear from me.
Yeah, so, you can't disappear, right? Even if you're repeating or you're just saying, hey, this is what's happening. It's the same when you talk to customers, right? If you don't have that update or you're still solving what the challenge could be, hearing from you that you're still working on it, it's much more important than just being like radio silent.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. And to that same point, it's, you're not always going to have great information, right? But I need to at least tell them what I know today. And that, it's not always easy, really. Quite honestly, it's not an easy thing to do because, again, there's emotions involved, right? There's, there's those types of human challenges again. Yeah.
It's part of being a leader, right? In that
that's
world, right? It's not every day is easy.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
That's
exactly right.
Yeah. So let's go back to the new site, right? Because you actually you chose flexibility over automation. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I think when you look at a new building, a lot of times, people will talk about automation and conveyors and new pick technology, and our approach was a little bit different, and partly because we're moving halfway across the country. So the big change again was on the people side, right? So we were introducing a brand new team, a team that's new to the manufacturer or the suppliers, right? New to even the simplest things I would say in the warehouse. A label on a box looks different from one vendor to another, or a piece of paper, a packing slip from one vendor to another might look a little bit different. And our team is learning all those things and learning where this information comes from and how to use that to make their jobs successful. So I think I chose, at least specifically, the more manual solution in nature, because ultimately I didn't know exactly what this would look like in the future. And this also allows us to adapt to changes that are happening down the road, right? So if I were to put in manual conveyor, now I learn, hey, the business environment changes 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Now I have to redesign around this very rigid structure. And so it gives us some short-term flexibility while also still learning what we needed to do on a day-to-day basis with a new team. Yeah.
What was one of the biggest surprises? I'm pausing the show because I want to make sure you signed up for the newsletter. Every week I share what I've learned for Leadership Manufacturing Podcast Conversation. And AI is all over, right? And AI is not what makes leadership hard in this industry. It's the human part. And that's what this newsletter is built around. So sign up, go to leadershipmanufacturing.com. Back to the show. by building this?
Yeah, I think sometimes I go back, and this is always where I need to improve myself, is going back and listing the things that you remember, right?
Yeah,
You get in the middle of things sometimes, and I think it's you learn how to work through it, but you don't always go back and
yeah,
look at it. So I think that for me, when I was thinking about this, the biggest surprise for me is that I know how to get from point A to point B,
yeah,
right? And I'm always sometimes, hey, I know all these steps and I can think through and I can overplan this, but then things happen, right? Things change. And so it's being able to be adaptable to those changes that are happening and saying, okay, I need to then pivot this change, but then I need to be consistent leader for my team. So I can't add chaos to chaos, right? So I need to say, my leadership needs to be steady. I'd be the smoothing, calm
yeah,
nature, right? Because things around us are going to change. And so probably the biggest surprise for me was that hey, look, people are still going to look for you to be a leader and to provide that steadiness and
yeah.
not add to the chaos, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no. And it's so important, right? And I think you said with the word pivot as well, right? Uh,
Hmm.
the world looks different every month.
Yep.
So you have to be able to be adaptable or be able to pivot. And that also takes planning, right? To able to do that.
Right.
So you don't lock everything in and then you're like, oh, we can't do anything, right?
That's right. Yeah, and especially when you think about if somebody will put a plan in place, and it's like, okay, in this date we're going to do this, and on this date
Yeah,
we're going to do this, and on this date we're going to do this, and then when something happens, it's like, oh, you get
yeah,
frozen, right? And you
yeah,
can't do that, right? It's figure out a new plan and move forward, right? And that's
yeah,
that's a bit of the, I think the surprise is you never know really what those things are going to be
yeah.
until you get in the middle of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then after, right, you learn and then you have that knowledge and that
That's
experience.
right.
It makes it easier next time, but next time it looks different. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You're
so
exactly
now
right. It's
remember,
not
right?
all the variables are exactly the same. To your
No,
point.
yeah. And then that's what we're teaching our kids here, right? Be ready. No.
That's right. Exactly. Yes.
What about, I want to touch a little bit on AI because AI is all over, right? And that's also AI in operation. So what do you see and, what feels real today and what is still really early?
Yeah, I think AI today is, I can see it working for decision making when you have good data, right? If I
Yeah.
get good sources of information, it can collect all that information and provide you some output. I think, when you think about warehouse processes, how do I slot my inventory? How do I move my inventory in the
Yeah.
right area at the right time? Those kind of decisions can happen with AI. I think where it still seems maybe not as close, I guess, is in the management on the floor, right? What it can't do is it can't go out to the floor and realize that, hey, Johnny over here had his son throw up on the way to school today, and now he's having a bad day, and I
Yeah.
need to go
Yeah.
over there and talk to him about, hey, I
Yeah.
still need you to get this and this done.
Yeah.
That's not going to be there for AI anytime
Oh.
soon, in my mind,
It's
right?
like
But
read the room, right? Of seeing
yeah,
what
that's right.
exactly happened, what's underneath, because it's the feelings, it's the interaction, right?
That's right. That's right. I think,
Yeah.
certainly. And maybe just to touch on that a bit more, I think about the data side. And if your data is not great, your data is not clean.
Yeah.
So, you still have to trust what comes out of there, but then verify it, right? So
Yeah.
I've heard this before. It's the trust but verify kind of mentality. It's like, okay, here's the information, but I still
Yeah.
need to feel good enough about what I'm seeing to go implement it based off of some AI data output, right? But again, I would say the big difference for me operationally is there's still such a human piece of what we do every day. I don't see that, being an immediate change, right? It's more long term down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is important to have this human aspect, right? Because
Yeah.
that is how you're going to succeed as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. I think
Yeah.
that's me. If somebody were to look, ask me something about, even this move to Sager and everything else, that's the big part. It's like, again,
Yeah.
your resume can look really great, but it's how do you lead your team? And those things you're not going to see those there. Those are the soft skills that people
Yeah.
don't see, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, they're important, right? And it's also changing, I think, right? Because you need more skills in today's world.
Right.
But that's this one, like going in, reading, the room, right? Even if you're
Yeah,
like on a Teams call or a Zoom call, right? You need to be able to read that environment,
I
uh,
agree.
and that you need that small talk.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
right.
and how do you listen to that, right? Is that water cooler? And it's important that you have it, because it shows so much, right? And that's where you see company culture as well. So that's
Yeah.
I think that's like a hidden, or maybe not hidden, but that's something you need to be sure to to protect and to nurture,
Right.
right, in the right way. Because if you don't have it, there's nothing left of that company culture, and company culture is so important.
And I think that's a great way of saying it too, because to your point on the AI side, it can give you all this background information, give you things to do, take action,
Yeah.
but ultimately you have to go implement those things. You have to then be able to do those things in my case, in the warehouse floor. And that is so much driven by our culture. We're not going to be just this, hey, do this and walk that way, right? That's not how
Oh,
this works. So
yeah.
things, like we said earlier, it moves, it pivots, it
Yeah.
changes,
Yeah.
and
And it
you
takes a
need some
team,
flexibility.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes a
Mhm.
team. It's not just one person, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
You need that team behind you.
Absolutely right. Yeah. You know, you could provide a strategy, but again, your ideas and strategy have to be trusted by the group around you, and they have to
Yeah.
have faith, right, that you're
Yeah.
doing a good job for them, and that the things you're communicating to them are the truth and are you're honest with them. So I agree 100%. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Nice. Okay, so I want to know how do you learn? Because there's a lot of new territory or new
Yes.
skills, right? How do you learn?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people would say, maybe you're reading books or things like that. I try to learn by experience, right?
Yeah.
So, and what I mean by that is, if somebody knows more about something than I do, okay, let me go ask their experience. Let me go
Yeah.
get their feedback. Let me understand what's worked for them.
Yeah.
I don't need to be the leading edge, the cutting edge, and know it all myself. And I'd much rather lean on a team of people or lean on the experts in certain areas and say, okay, what pieces of that can I take, right?
Yeah.
And then, okay, let me go implement that in my area.
Yeah.
The little pieces that make sense for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I more like what we're doing here. I think that's a good way to learn. Is now
Yeah.
you have a network of people. You go talk to people. You understand their background, and leverage the experiences that those folks have. Right.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. What about mistakes? I know I make mistakes, even though it's tough sometimes to
You're
actually
not perfect.
make
I'm
them,
not
right?
perfect either.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, but how does that show up in leadership, right? Because you need to be the leader, right? That goes, with your team. And
Mhm.
there's different kinds of leadership, but there's the people who say, okay, I want to share, when I fail, so other team members, right, or the organization can see it's okay to fall down and then go up again, and then let's do that pivot or correction or whatever you call it. So
Mhm.
how do you show that you are not perfect?
Yeah, I think that's I've said this many times to my team members. Right, I'm not perfect, but not even close. Right, I make plenty of mistakes. And what I think is important is what do you learn from those mistakes, right?
Yeah,
So it's yes, mistakes happen,
yeah,
right? I'm not going to repeat the same mistake, right?
yeah,
But it's what have I learned? How do I now navigate that same
yeah,
problem in the future? I think you know and the other thing is too, you have to give people the freedom to make those mistakes. That's how they're going to
yeah,
learn. That's how they're going to grow. And
yeah,
I think sometimes that's really hard
yeah,
because there's pressure, right?
yeah, yeah,
There's external
yeah,
customers, there's people, there's feedback. All these things
yeah,
have to happen, and you have to be able to give people the chance to make mistakes, to learn and
yeah,
grow and develop, and then come back and say, okay, what do we do next, right? How do we change this decision in the future, right?
yeah.
But yeah, I think absolutely to your point, it's probably leading by saying, "Hey, I'm not
Yeah.
perfect to begin with."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, right. Yeah. And have
Mhm.
that open door policy as well, right? Come and
Sure.
just talk about it if it is that you need, some feedback before you like start running, maybe, right? Or if you need that feedback in between because suddenly there's a hiccup. Um,
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one because the more I think about it, it's kind of now it gets into your leadership style a little bit, right? So,
yeah.
some people would say, "Look, I don't want somebody looking over my shoulder,
Yeah.
micromanaging me or whatever," right? And that's not my style. That's not what I would want for me,
Yeah.
for myself. And so, I think sometimes, you get back to kind of what have you learned too. And I'm learning still that I need to be able to be present at certain times when people are struggling with a decision so they
Yeah.
don't feel like they're left on an island saying,
Yeah.
oh man, is somebody going to look over me and say I made
Yeah.
this mistake? So I need to give them as much information as possible to make an informed decision,
Yeah.
and then look back and say, okay, how do we work through this together? Hey, this is maybe how I would have done it a little bit different, but
Yeah.
maybe this is the information you didn't have, and here's why
Yeah.
I would have done it this way. So a lot of it is explaining the why, whether good or bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it comes down to your style a little bit more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
had at a certain point where I actually had a team where I was like, okay, let's have a weekly meeting and we talk about. I don't think we called it failure. I don't think I call it. I just said
Okay.
like the word challenge, right? Because it's a little
Yeah.
bit more like you don't panic. And I actually started to say, hey, I had this challenge, right? And it didn't work out, and then I pivot, and then I changed it, or I got this learning, or I did this, I asked some more questions, or this is how I solve it. So I started that, and then we made a round every week
Nice.
to say,
Yeah, great.
what's happening. And by being the leader, right, and having that seat and start to say, hey, I failed, right, head down on the ground
Hmm.
there. And of course, it had to be some good examples. It could just be, you have to really
Right.
show that you did mess up, right?
Yeah.
That actually helped the whole team communication and how we trusted each other, and also during the week, right? You could say, hey, I'm stuck here. What should we
That's
do
right.
next? Or so it opened up that you could show, to say, hey, you're not that perfect, right? It's not that Instagram, everything just looks shiny, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think there's different ways of how to break down. I don't want to call it a silo because you are a team, but to break down to say, how can we actually support each other and help each other to get there
Right.
faster? But you need to show the other side.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Much like I know we've talked before about my kids and things maybe in the
Yeah,
past, right? But when I think about that too, it's, I would say it's praise in public, right? You discipline in private, right? So
yeah,
it's very similar to that. I try
yeah,
to teach my kids the same. I try to teach our team the same. It's that when we're in that group setting, like you just highlighted there,
yeah,
the good things that come out of that, to your
yeah,
point, is we used to call it issues instead of challenges for the
yeah.
same
Oh,
reason,
that's
right?
perfect.
Or challenges versus issues. Or I can't remember exactly which way it was, but one way or another, it was the same
Yeah,
kind of concept. You don't want to
yeah,
make it sound bad, right? But it's
yeah,
like, okay, those are the things I wouldn't do in public, right? You're not going and saying, oh, you made all these wrong decisions,
yeah,
right? In
right.
this group
Yeah,
setting. Instead,
yeah,
it's going to be, here's the praises that we
yeah,
get in the group, and then individually, let's talk about the things that we need to do,
yeah,
in a closed door or at least one-on-one,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think that's the way I would say the style comes across again from your leadership style, very
yeah.
similar to what you're describing there. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about with leadership skills, right? What matters the most?
Interesting. Yeah, I think it needs to be a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah.
I know that's a very generic way of saying it, right? But
Huh.
I don't think uh, maybe that from my past experience, I would say one, your attitude needs to be steady, right?
Yeah.
You can't have your team show up on a daily basis and not know what to expect from you, right? So if I come in and
Yeah.
I've had a bad day at my house or my personal life, but then I bring that bad day to work,
Yeah.
that's a tough environment for anybody to work in. Now you're on pins and needles, they would say, right? So to me, I think it's a steady nature, steady course. Being consistent is very, very important. Now around that, you have to have a lot of different skills.
Yeah.
But that piece of regardless of what your background is, you're a people person, you're more data minded, you're a data analytics person.
Yeah.
Their style it still needs to be very steady and consistent, I would say, with the team, so that they have a good understanding of what to expect from you on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's important, right? And it's not just a one thing, right? Or one
that's
skill.
right.
It's
Hmm.
actually many more skills that goes in, so you can be that person and that
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were talking about with the resume. You're like, oh, I got this bullet point in my career.
Yeah.
I got this bullet point in my
Yeah.
career. Yeah, but that's a lot of little things that happen to you over time. And, your past experiences, of course, come into that. But I think if you're going to say like one skill, certainly that's one, is being steady
Yeah.
and kind of leading with empathy and understanding, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do that, then no matter the situation you're in, you're going to be able to move forward from that, right? If I again, to use the same analogy of the ocean's going crazy, if I add more
Yeah.
stirring to that, right, and instead of a calm presence,
Yeah.
well, then that's going to create more chaos again, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. No, and maybe this leads in because again, if somebody new, right? Because we need younger talent into the industry. We're like,
Yeah.
it's getting there, right? We see it,
Mm-hmm.
but we need more younger talent coming in. What kind of advice would you give them if they're just starting?
Yeah, I think being patient, which is really hard,
Yeah,
because I think I'm maybe I look maybe a little bit older, but I'm still younger generation, I would say, than some of my peers, and so
yeah,
to me, one thing I had learned early on my career was exactly that: to be patient. I really was looking for what's next. How do I move on to the next position,
yeah,
the next role? And sometimes I think it's take a step back and say, okay, instead, how do I fill a need? And then when I fill that need, that's going to turn into the next role, as opposed to always looking for the next one. So I think patience is the biggest thing I would tell somebody. But then also, with that same breath, that doesn't mean you can just sit on the sideline and expect something to happen either.
No.
It means patience for looking for the right opportunity is probably the way to say it, right?
Yeah.
Don't immediately think I have to go do this job right now, otherwise I won't get X in the future.
Yeah.
And that's not quite the reality, right? So I think patience and picking your timing, patience with that. Yeah.
That's good. I like that. I don't think I've heard that described that way before.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
No, I'm sure with other words, but it's just, I actually really like it to be patient, because it's, again, what we started with, right? Everything goes so fast. So it's also to learn, right? I also think ask as many questions and network as much. I think that's one aside, along, right? Not being patient, because having that communication, you can learn a lot, even if it's from the same peer, right? Or if you go to like a networking event or something like that. But that gives so much back to hear what's going on, because sometimes you can be in that organization bubble, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, this is how the world looks like, right? But getting some perspective from somebody else that's outside of your organization bubble, is also great input.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I try to look back at early in my career, and I think there were times where I wasn't, quite honestly, as patient as I probably should have been. And I don't think it comes across always as a positive as you might think, right? Because of that, and I think as the more I kind of think about your question there and what that really means to me, I think it's hard, because today, unfortunately, there are things around us, social media, things like that sometimes tell us we're not living up to the standard, right? And there is no standard. You're defining that for yourself. And so I think that's important for people to understand and learn, is that, you can't compare yourself to where everybody's at, because every environment's a little bit different, and everything that you've done in your past is different than them, and the decisions you made are different, right? So again, that's why I kind of circle back to what is the one thing, and it's like, it's just looking and kind of surveying the field and making your move based off what you're seeing, right? Don't overreact one way or another. Yeah.
No, and also, right, the role that we all have look different 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. So if you just look on that paper, you have to adapt, you have to change, right? To live into that new description or the new expectation to achieve this, the wins and the goals and all, everything.
That's right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And there's only, sometimes I think we get so caught up on the idea that I need to be at this age, I need to do this, right? You have this plan, like we're almost to circle all the way back to this planning, right?
Now it's time to buy the dog, right? No.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Oh, I need to do this at this age, and I do this at this, and this at this age. And I think sometimes when those things don't happen, then it's like, okay, well, where am I missing? What's my next steps? And so that's where I think it can't be that rigid, right? You need to have some flexibility and adapt to the things that are happening, and pick your timing, right?
Yeah, I love it. Okay, last question, Aaron. So you could go back in time. Let's just say 10 years. What would you tell yourself or recommend yourself?
Let's see. I think when I look back 10 years and I would say to myself, and maybe even an easier way is like, what would I tell, my kids, from what, where I made mistakes, right? But I think if I look back at 10 years and say, okay, what could I have done differently or changed? I think the biggest thing for me is probably try to communicate, I think, to my colleagues that, look, I'm trying to do things to support you and make your job better and easier also. So early on, my background's industrial engineering, and it's process change and continuous improvement. And sometimes I think that can come across like I'm telling people this is the only way to do it, or this is a better way. And the way I communicated that probably wasn't the best, right? There are definitely mistakes that I made in the past on how to communicate those things and show and take the time to explain the why, right? As opposed to saying, here's the outcome, here's the why of the decision that I'm making, right? So I think that's probably the thing I maybe could have learned more back then, right? Or been a little bit different back then. Yeah.
I like that. And I'm like, I'm an engineer as well. So I'm like, and I've done a lot. But I've done a lot of process improvement back in the day.
Perfect.
And what I learned from that is also, if you with a whiteboard, and that can be like old fashioned now because we have everything is digital. But having the whiteboard, even just the Post-its, still
Absolutely.
today is so much more, I think. It's like the hands-on, right? You get much more questions or what's happening. So I've done
That's
a
right.
lot of like, this is our current state, let's map out the future state, right?
That's exactly
And
right.
having everybody in the room, it is so rewarding to do that. It takes time.
That's right.
But having I think what I learned, and I want to hear from you, right, is that
Yeah.
when you have everybody in that's touching that process or whatever you want to change, right? But if you have everyone in, suddenly you're like, oh, I didn't know that. That's why we did this. Oh, and you can ask, oh, why are we doing that so early, right? We should do that later on.
That's right.
Then you can suddenly to remove, what's maybe a little bit you don't need to have in that process or that SOP where it would end up.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right, because and maybe to take a step back to that even, right? In order to do that, you've got to establish this team relationship and this team culture first.
Yeah.
Right. So I've been in some environments where we get into a room just like you're describing, and the individuals are very focused on their job.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're not comfortable enough saying, here's the challenges that I have, or expressing their challenges. Right.
Yeah.
And so you're exactly right. I think it's building the team, and then you get into an environment like that where everybody's comfortable talking to each other, right? And but how do you get there? How do you make those steps to do that? And I think for me, looking at your whiteboard, future state, current states, and all those things, that's probably where I was too fast to try to solve the problem. My personality is to fix it, right? It's like, there's a problem, I need to fix it.
The engineer brain, come on.
That's right. Get me right to the end, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of steps that go in between there that have to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, again, I just, looking back, I wish I had realized a little bit better on how to make those changes happen. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so easy to look back, right? And saying, oh, I should have done that, right? Now you have so much more knowledge, experience, everything, right? So it's part of you now, right? So what you did back then is actually what made you what you look like today, to be even better of what you're doing. So I know sometimes it's tricky to say what would you tell yourself, but
all those little things make up who you are, your background, and where you are today. Right? You're exactly right. So it's kind of like you were talking before about these mistakes and not being perfect. Well, those are all the things that mold you into who you are today, right? Right. And that doesn't mean those things were all negative. They may have felt that way at the time, but now it's turned into a positive, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I still burn my hand a few times, right, on that stove. So
of course.
Not as much anymore, but.
Well, good for you. Sometimes I got scars on both hands, but that's okay. Yeah.
So you stopped cooking. No, I'm just kidding.
I thought the right hand was smart, but then left, no, not so much. Yeah.
That's funny. So Aaron, thank you so much. I think this was a blast. And it's funny how, it's always like how you reconnect, right? Because I was like, oh, you're an engineer. And I'm like, I'm an engineer.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm like, and I've done this. I love that, because it's like, it's connecting on a different level as well, right? And understanding each other, even though we're not, different places. So,
Yeah, but it's like you said, the background can still be applied, and experiences can apply to any of these roles, right? So I appreciate the time. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by Sega Electronics. For more than 135 years, Sega has been helping connecting technology and people. They are a trusted North American distributor of interconnect, power, and electromechanical products, and they also offer custom solutions to meet unique needs. With a reputation for quality, innovation, and customer service, Sega delivers the confidence that technology will work when it matters the most. Learn more at Sega.com. Thanks for listening to the episode. I appreciate you here. Please share it with somebody, either from your team, your organization, or just with somebody within the electronics industry. And again, remember, stay curious, keep learning. Check out leadershipmanufacturing.com. See you next time.